So I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how exactly to talk about the DR, and I don't think I ever really quite figured it out, but at some point, not making the video became an excuse to not be making more vlog videos, which was fine while we were all still in the same place, but now that people are starting to scatter, it feels like at some point I need to just sit down and do it and hang the consequences of whether it's good or not. So basically, this is my experience in the Dominican Republic. Roll the intro! People tend to ask a lot about how was the DR in terms of what was different and what are some cool things that you did there, and I think that mostly they ask those things to be polite, but in the interest of getting some of that out of the way, here are some things about the DR. The people spent a lot of time outside socializing with their neighbors, more than I can really understand why there would be a difference there. They don't spend as much time on the internet as I would expect. There's a lot of animals roaming around in the streets. The people are all very religious. The exchange rate is extremely high, which is great because it means I get to do things like this with money that looks like this, which was fun. The program I was there on was an internship, and we spent, honestly, most of the time that I was there going over orientation stuff. We had barely started the real work by the time I left, which was one of the things that frustrated me about the program, is because I spent 8 days going over the same orientation materials beforehand with the Northwestern students at Northwestern. So it felt like a lot of time just reiterating the same concepts. The country is obviously quite poor. There are a lot of unfinished buildings. People drive crazy, and when they drive, they usually ride on motorcycles, which are extremely profoundly common, but which we as students are not allowed to use, which is fine because, again, people drive crazy, and I would not feel safe at all. The food is plentiful, the showers are cold. I took a bucket shower at one point because the water just stopped working, which happens sometimes, apparently. Honestly, I spent most of the time in El Sabo, which is kind of a small town in the middle of nowhere, so it wasn't exactly a full DR experience. It's like going to some small nowhere town in the middle of the US and assuming that's the US experience. I got a pretty limited slice of life going on here, and there wasn't a lot to actually do there. But mostly I was struck by how much things were more the same there than they are different. I mean, it's still fundamentally just people kind of doing what they do. And all of that's well and good if you want to talk about the Dominican Republic experience, but I don't know that the Dominican Republic experience is a good way of describing my Dominican Republic experience. My Dominican Republic experience wasn't defined by being overwhelmed with heat and putting on mosquito nets and petting that one baby cow that runs around our neighborhood sometimes. Those are things that happened, sure, but they don't feel like the important things that happened. My experience in the Dominican Republic was bad. I mean, like, really bad, you guys. And it was 2 weeks, so obviously it's not like every moment was unambiguously awful. There were some good moments, too. But sometimes I think about the fact that if I didn't leave early, I would still be there right now, and it kind of makes me want to throw up, so there were a bunch of reasons for this, but I think the biggest one that I'm going to go into here is that I didn't know anybody there. I mean, like, sure, you kind of know people from your group, but I wasn't really friends with anyone. I didn't have a support network. There was nobody there who I could talk to about artsy video games, and if I was upset about something, there was nobody who I felt like I could talk to about it. I had to make phone calls to the outside world, which is just not nearly as effective, and having no support base is just not a great system when you have a lot of stresses already going on and no friends there and are living in a country which you are not fluent in the dominant language of. When I came to Northwestern for the first time, they put us in PA groups in order to kind of organize and introduce us to the world, which is just a group of other students who you kind of do activities with for orientation. And my PA group was all RTVF students, which I gather now was in the minority. Most other people were just scattered in a mishmash of other students, but my group was all people who had the same major as me, so I had a small group of people who I could immediately befriend for at least a short time before I found more meaningful connections in my dorm, which is where I eventually found them. So at school, I never had a lack of a group that I could just go to, you know? I mean, there's always the sense that, sure, no friendships that you form in, a month or however much at school is ever going to compare to the kind of lasting friendships that you've put years into at high school, and that remains true, but at least I had something. As much as freshman year was a frequently lonely time for me, it was not completely isolated, but the Dominican Republic didn't even have that. And so it was this ever-present dance of I needed to go out and hang out with the other people in order to try and foster those connections and try and experience more of the world, but every time I did that, it made me anxious because I was cut off completely from anyone back home and was completely unable to make any kind of social attachments there. It was ultimately rewarding, I think, but turns out not rewarding enough, I guess. And maybe that was just me playing it safe, but Jesus, man, I think I just need other people around once in a while. Everybody who I've talked to has been incredibly supportive of my decision to come home and to try something else and learn to drive, which I guess is the only productive thing that I'm really doing with this summer anymore because it feels too late to find a job, but it's tough not to feel like I've kind of let myself down. I mean, I talk a big game about going on adventures and, just doing things, and here comes the real test of that, and I kind of buckled. And I don't know exactly what that means for travel in the future. Maybe I just need to wait for a better time when I'm not worried about making a feature film and whether a half a dozen of my friends will still be alive when I get back. Or maybe it just means that I shouldn't travel alone ever, and that I'm really just better off taking other people with me whenever I go somewhere. Or maybe I just shouldn't travel at all, although I really hope it's not that option. And if I'm doing this in the style of a Thoughts from Places video, I figure this is about the time when I'm supposed to take everything and turn it into this grand, poetic, universal statement on the human condition or something, but I don't know that I have anything like that. I don't even know how much of value I took away from the DR other than a handful of new and still woefully inadequate coping strategies. It's sad to me that this is my first experience abroad. You get on Tinder and half the people there talk about how much they love traveling, and my first and so far only experience traveling was just sad and frustrating and frightening, and it's hard not to feel some kind of nebulous social pressure that travel is supposed to be fun, and this was a thing that I was supposed to enjoy, and I just didn't. Two weeks and 10 minutes of footage, and I wish that I had something better to say, but here we are, so I guess I'll just close by listing off a few of the things that I am just so grateful to be back to. I'm glad to be able to pick my own portion sizes. I'm glad to be able to take a hot shower. I'm glad to be able to get texts and have some degree of internet anywhere I go. I'm glad that when I need to go and take a walk, I can just do that, and I'm not beholden to anyone, and I don't need to be afraid from my safety just because I'm outside of my door. I'm glad that I have friends who I can just show up and talk to. I'm glad for movies and for knowing my way around and for accidentally bumping into people I know in random places. I'm glad for the occasional physical, tactile contact with another human being. I'm glad for the option to see friends even when I don't actually see them. I am just unreasonably, profoundly glad to be home. I'll see you guys next week. PS in response to Ben, I've mentioned this before, but I'm super proud of you and also learned how to hold a camera in landscape mode.